order here. So this is a unique type of board meeting where we have two boards meeting simultaneously. Perfect timing. So I'll, at the request of both board chairs, I'll try to hold the meeting together. If it gets out of control, I'll rely on both board chairs to help me out. But I thank you all for attending this evening. Mr. Eckhoff was unable to attend this evening because of a personal emergency in another state. Beth Kuzma is on the phone. So Beth, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I am.
All right, was it impractical for you to be here in person?
Yes, very much so.
Okay, and is there anyone else in the room with you?
No.
Okay, very good. So with that said, thank you to all the parents and community members for showing up again 2 Mondays in a row. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here. The purpose of this meeting is for me to share with both boards and the public the recommendation I'm bringing forward on behalf of our team, and then answer any questions primarily from board members to hear their discussion and to have them weigh in, as last week was really about the community and the public. There will be an opportunity this evening for the public to share their thoughts and opinions if they'd like as well. But tonight is primarily about the board and hopefully moving forward towards a decision this evening. Going to decline the call from my children. So first I thought I'd review quickly the timeline for today. I went over this last week, so this is a review from last week. In the spring, our registrations began. We noticed a significant uptick above projections. Late spring, the Amherst School District added a second grade teacher, even though it was unbudgeted because of class size issues there. They're in the 140s, I'm sorry, for the size of that class, and so we've already made that commitment. In May, we notified the board that enrollment in kindergarten and first grade was higher than anticipated and that there was an issue that needed to be addressed. June 21st, updated them that our budget.
Could I ask you to speak up so those in the rear can really hear you?
Absolutely, Mrs. Davis, so sorry. If you can't hear me back there, just raise your hand and I'll speak.
Okay.
Try to speak even more loudly. June 21st, notified the board that because of some budget issues that came up outside of this issue, we would unlikely be able to add staff from an unbudgeted perspective beyond the second grade teacher. June 29th, I met with Amherst and Mont Vernon School Board leadership to discuss the issue and to broach the topic of Amherst students attending kindergarten and or first grade in Mont Vernon. July 2nd, we had a joint Amherst-Mont Vernon board meeting where I laid out the issue to the full boards and asked for their blessing to continue investigating the challenge and looking for solutions. July 6th, met with Amherst kindergarten and first grade staff to discuss the issue and to gather their perspective and input, which was helpful. Then July 9th, public announcement to the community and began the process of gathering input from many, many folks. Last Monday night, we had a public forum. I think it was over 100 people that attended, which was fantastic. About 2 hours of questions and commentary from the public, which I thought was very strong and was influential in the decision-making process for us. And then tonight, we're looking to make a recommendation. From tonight, I have another slide later on that'll go through what happens from here based on our recommendations. So just to review class size trends, and I'm going to not brush over this, but try to not spend a lot of time for the sake of brevity. Class size trends in the state are generally going down. Grades 1 and 2. Kindergarten class size numbers are not published by the state. You'll notice I changed the title of this slide to say class size, not enrollment trends, which was a mistake last week. Mont Vernon class size trends ticking upward, and then Amherst's are growing at a more consistent rate but climbing. It's worth noting that these class size numbers ranked Mont Vernon 147 out of 148 school districts in grades 1 and 2 last year in the state, and Amherst just not far behind at 140 out of 148 school districts. So our anticipated enrollment numbers updated this afternoon. We currently have 132 kindergarten students enrolled in Amherst. With 6 teachers, that would be 22 kids per class, which is, if you go back, is even above what Amherst was at this past year. In first grade, we have 125 students as of this afternoon, I believe. Is that right, Nikki? Yeah. Again, with 6 teachers, that'd be about 20.8 students per class. We don't make a habit of dividing children into multiple parts, so it'll be 20 in some classes and 21 in some others, obviously. In Mont Vernon, we have 23 kindergarten students as of this morning, and 30 in first grade. We already have 2 teachers committed in first grade, so that's 15 kids per class, but it would be 23 students in the kindergarten class in Mont Vernon. So, a reiteration from last week, we know that these class size issues will only be addressed with a long-term solution that will take a number of years to come, whatever that might be. After this evening, assuming we come to consensus, we'll be starting that process of getting feedback from our boards in both towns about, Mont Vernon has less of an issue, but certainly Amherst will need feedback from the community, school board, administrators, teachers, et cetera, about what we need to look at for the future. Short term is what we do between after this coming school year and when a long-term solution is available to us. So what do we do in the interim to make sure we don't have massive class sizes or the school completely full in every nook and cranny? And then tonight's really about the immediate term. So, options we consider, half-day kindergarten. We've looked at even more closely since last week, given the significant amount of feedback we received last week about half-day kindergarten. We've investigated multi-age. I've had a further discussion about that. We've looked at reassigning existing staff in Amherst to cover the needs that we have, and we have an update about our thinking relative to that process, even from last week's meeting. We could have an emergency meeting, which meeting in the legal context means having a special election process with another public hearing, another deliberative session, another voting day, assuming that a superior court gives us permission to do that, and we demonstrate to them that an emergency exists. And an emergency in the statutes requires passing a 5-part test, which is not the easiest thing to do. Even if we did that, we wouldn't have the funds in time for school to start, as we all know. And also we looked at the Mont Vernon Village School for Amherst students as well. I'm going to ask Christine to talk through a little bit more about our thinking about half-day kindergarten. Christine?
Yeah. So in considering whether we give an option for half-day kindergarten, we went back to the reasons why we moved from a half-day K program to a full-day K program. And the main reason was really time. So it was a move from 440 hours of instructional time in a half-day K program to 920 hours of time in a full-day K program. Over a number of years ago, our state adopted new standards for both math and for English language arts. And those new standards were significantly more rigorous than our prior standards. And we found that when we started implementing those new standards in a half-day K program, we could not cover all of the kindergarten standards, or if we were covering and actually not really deeply learning those kindergarten standards. So the kindergarten teachers felt really strongly they needed more time, not just to quickly teach those standards, but actually to allow time for students to really internalize them and to master them. We also needed more time for social interactions and even specials. Our half-day K program didn't have art and music. So in looking at our half-day versus full-day and considering a half-day option, we felt really strongly that allowing a half-day option wouldn't give students time to master the standards that they need to for kindergarten. And the other piece is the need for a consistent schedule. One of the reasons we moved to full-day K was because some of our students had sometimes even 4 transitions throughout the day in different programs that they were going to and then coming to us and going to other programs. So that was a really important piece that we wanted to reduce that stress on students making all those transitions. And we did have a chance to look at our data and really our assessment scores from our students in our last year of our half-day K program versus just this past year of our full-day kindergarten program, and they were really compelling. So I know the chart is maybe a little blurry, so I'll share a little bit with you. This is our NWEA assessment. And that assessment students take in both math and reading, and they actually take 3 times during the year. And in our half-day K program, students came to us in the fall. Their fall percentile score overall as a class was in the 86th percentile. When they left us in the spring, they were in the 45th percentile. So their percentile level dropped from fall. They still grew, so their scores were increasing, but not increasing as fast as what the norms say they should for kindergarten. And the same for reading, and it was even more significant of a change. We went from the 88th percentile in the fall to the 27th percentile in the spring in our half-day kindergarten program. And our full-day K program just this past year, students started out in math in the fall in the 80th percentile, and they left us in the 91st percentile. And that's overall as a cohort or as a class. And in reading, they came to us at the 78th percentile, and they left us at the 87th percentile. So what that's saying is that our students were only growing half as much in meeting standards in our half-day program. They had half of the time, and that makes sense. But with the expectations that are needed for completion of the kindergarten year, we didn't feel that this was a viable option, because our belief is that students won't be able to fully internalize and master all of the standards they need to with a half-day K option.
Thank you, Christine. Also, multi-age, if you could speak about that, Christine.
Yeah, so we actually explored, and the Mont Vernon board might recall, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we actually explored multi-age options up at Mont Vernon because of really the challenging class size and that fluctuating class size. And there are some really strong benefits to multi-age, and a lot of the work we're doing right now is actually moving us in the direction of multi-age. But a challenge with being able to implement for fall, and I'll speak to that. So a few of the benefits, multi-age really allows students to learn at their own pace, and it's much more child-centered. Since you have a wider range of learners in your classroom in front of you, you're doing a lot less stand and deliver and a lot of small group instruction. So you're really able to have a more child-centered approach. Often with multi-age, the teacher typically stays with that child for more than 1 year. So that teacher gets to know the children much better, their learning styles, and even the families as well. And often there's higher language development seen in multi-age classrooms, and that's according to the research, and that's actually because you have often higher models or older peers that can actually help you to develop that higher language, which is really interesting, and often because you have to develop such a strong community in a multi-age classroom, since the students are often working together, that comes out. So a lot of really wonderful benefits to multi-age. But one of the challenges, and I shared last week, we have grade level curriculum. So our curriculum was not developed to implement in a multi-age setting. So what happens when you have a grade level curriculum and you put students of 2 different grades together, you end up having multi-grade, not really truly multi-age. So you have a teacher trying to teach a kindergarten curriculum and a first grade curriculum, and that doesn't work. So you really need pretty extensive teacher training and time to do that deep curriculum work to bring those standards together and have them almost like roll or cycle together, if that makes sense. That's the only way to build a multi-age curriculum, so that you see how each standard develops, and then it's often more project-based in a multi-age classroom, so developing those deep projects that hit those wide ranges of standards. So that curriculum work is not done because we weren't anticipating moving to multi-age. It's something we feel strongly about in the future. And it's also really difficult to operate 2 different structures in one school. So when just say kindergarten has an assembly, what happens to the multi-age group? With lunch, where does that multi-age group eat? With recess, so much of our structure is actually built by grade level now. It's really actually often a challenge in schools that have 1 or 2 multi-age classrooms, and then the rest grade level classrooms. The other challenge is transitioning out of multi-age. If we give our students this really rich experience, say we had a K1 multi-age, and then those first graders, they haven't had a multi-age experience, and then they go into 2nd grade back into a grade level experience, that can be a really disruptive transition for them. And we're even looking at and talking through different transition options, but we feel that implementing this just for class size isn't the right reason to implement multi-age. It's a really great philosophy and a great structure, but if we are going to implement that, we want to do that really well. And the teacher professional development needs to be there. Often when you implement multi-age, you end up doing it just multi-grade, and you have both curriculum in the same room together, and that's not the experience we want for our students or for our teacher who's gonna feel like they're constantly trying to catch up.
Thank you, Christine. So what's our recommendation? I'm recommending that we reassign the Clark Wilkins instructional coach to first grade. For those of you who know who that is, that's Liz Alexikos. We've already spoken with her, and she will be assigned to first grade this coming year to address class size issues in first grade. We've struggled with this next decision, but ultimately what I'm recommending is that we reassign an unfilled position at Amherst Middle School to Clark Wilkins School to add another seventh kindergarten teacher to our staff down there. So that's not a person moving from the middle school to the elementary. It's an unfilled position that has not been filled yet. And so we'll post to have another kindergarten teacher hired at Clark Wilkins School. That also requires a paraprofessional for that classroom. And so we're also going to transition a library paraprofessional to that seventh kindergarten classroom for this coming year. Those three changes are three positions that are needed. They're not easy positions to reassign and to transition for this coming year. So these are, you can expect to see all three of these positions budgeted for this next school year as additional new positions, because we need to put these folks back in their proper spots, these positions back in their proper place moving forward. So essentially, we've heard the strong input from parents and from board members and others, and we're doing what we can internally in Amherst to add 7 sections of each, 7 sections of kindergarten, 7 sections of first grade. However, and that addresses most of you. Most of you are gonna say, okay, I'm done, check the box, I'm happy, thank you. Others of you came forward and said, you know what, Mont Vernon actually works for me and for my family. Not a lot of you, but some of you. And so I'm gonna recommend that we keep that option open for kindergarten and first grade. And if the numbers work, if enough people come where it makes sense, where Mont Vernon can add additional teaching staff and make it financially viable for both sides, I'm still want to leave that option open for parents. So if you're a parent where you say, I really want my kid to go to Mont Vernon Village School for kindergarten or first grade, I'm recommending that we still leave that option open. That requires amending the existing tuition agreement between both school districts. It requires us to work on transportation for parents, which is something we're going to talk about in a little bit, but ultimately we're going to work on almost an individual basis. We've had some folks come forward and say, you know what, that works great. I have someone in Mont Vernon that watches my children before or after school, so that might work for me more efficiently and more effectively. So that's ultimately our recommendation. I want to make sure that I mention that from this point forward, assuming we come to, and there's board support for these recommendations, we need to immediately shift gears and start thinking about our short and long-term options for the year after this coming school year, because time is ticking away. So the net effect of what I'm recommending, and this chart breaks it down. If you're a numbers person, you'll appreciate this chart. Right now, with 6 teachers in kindergarten in Amherst, that's 22 per class. With 7, it goes to 18.9. And if by some chance 10 Amherst residents choose Mont Vernon instead of Clark Wilkins School, that would drop the class size to 17.4, which is right around where our goal is for kindergarten. In first grade in Amherst, we're at 20.8 students per class right now with 6 teachers. Reassigning Ms. Alexikos to grade 1 drops it to 17.9, and by some chance there's 10 first graders that want to go to Mont Vernon Village School, which I don't think there will be, but if by some chance there's that many, it would even drop it further to 16.4 students per class, which again is right in our sweet spot for class size in Amherst. In Mont Vernon right now we have 23 kids per class in kindergarten with 1 teacher. If there's 10 Amherst kids, that would drop it to 16.5, because it would be 2 teachers for 33 kids. In grade 1, we have 15 per class right now with 2 teachers. If 10 went from first grade, then perhaps Mont Vernon could add a 3rd first grade teacher and drop it to 13.3, which is a pretty incredible class size. So the bottom line is that Amherst improves class size by 3 or 4 per class, would cost a tax impact of about $160,000, which is about 10 cents on the tax rate, if I do that math right. Mont Vernon improves class size about 5.5 in kindergarten and marginally in first grade there. So that's a recommendation. Issues still to be worked out. Transportation we've talked about. It would likely work out where students could take their regular bus in the morning if they wanted to. We might be able to work out a shuttle still. We're going to wait for that until we see which parents sign up and what their requests are, what their needs are, and then work to address that more directly. Because we're talking about so few students here, to try to do a broad-based solution may not make the most sense. So we'll gather input from folks and then figure out what we can offer for transportation. In the afternoon, it's important to know that if students are shuttled back to Wilkins, they would not catch their afternoon bus. So they would not, Amherst students, there's no way they'd be able to take their regular afternoon bus home in the afternoon, but they could still be car pickup at Mont Vernon, car pickup at Wilkins after taking the shuttle, or take the Hampshire Hills or Boys and Girls Club bus from Mont Vernon Village School, or take the shuttle down and be part of the new morning program at Wilkins School before or after. The ongoing selection of Mont Vernon Village School, a number of parents said, I'm interested, but only if my kid can stay at Mont Vernon Village School for the duration. My suggestion to the Mont Vernon board is to accept those students as long as it doesn't create a class size issue for you down the road as a Mont Vernon school board member. So for example, if we have 12 new kindergarten students move into Mont Vernon over the course of this next year, that's going to create a class size issue in first grade, and then maybe they can't keep all of those kindergarten students in first grade as they matriculate after the school year. That's unlikely, but I think that would be the only reason why I think as a Mont Vernon board member I would say I can't agree without that one condition. But otherwise I don't see why a student couldn't continue if they wanted to. So here's how this would work specifically for Mont Vernon. I would look for you tonight to look at this and make your decision about my recommendations. You need to authorize me to conditionally hire a teacher because we don't have another board meeting prior to the start of school. We have on this Thursday, but we're not going to have a teacher hired by Thursday. We'll send a letter to all Amherst parents on August 8th, letting them know what's going on with the process, but we'll notify Mont Vernon parents as well about the changes that are happening because not everybody's been clued in to these changes. Next Monday will be an open house in Mont Vernon Village School, where this is, yeah, the title of these slides got mixed up. I apologize for that. These are the Amherst specific implementation steps. I apologize for that. So August 8th, which is Wednesday, I'm going to send a letter to all Amherst parents, letting them know what's going on. A fact sheet included about this process, include the information about the school day and how that would work. We'll have an open house next Monday night, so any parents who want to come who have maybe not heard about this issue in the letter in the mail and by emails the first they've heard of this, we'll have an open house next Monday to see the school. Not this Friday, but next Friday, I'll ask for selections to be made by parents so that we can make decisions and implement what we need to do. There'll be no need for parents who are staying at Clark Wilkins to let us know anything. If you want to stay at Clark Wilkins, you don't have to say a thing. We're just going to assume if we don't hear from you that that's where you're going to stay to make it easier for everybody. So, and then we'll notify parents on August 20th exactly where they've been assigned and how that's going to work out. So we have time to be ready for the school to start. Mont Vernon specific implementation steps. Board authorized things tonight, and then we make the facility changes as we need to, and then class lists are adjusted as they need to be adjusted. So.
Can you go back 3
I
slides?
have a quick question.
1 second, Beth. Yeah.
Can you go back another one? One more. One more. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Beth.
My question is, when will first grade parents at Wilkins be notified about any potential teacher change and things like that?
Yeah, great question. So first grade parents have already been notified of who their teachers are for this coming school year. And so there will be a change, whether anybody selects Mont Vernon or not. There will be change for some parents. And so we're likely going to wait until the August 20th date to update parents on that so that we see if there's changes related to Mont Vernon as well. So if by some chance 8 or 9 or 10 parents from a particular classroom all chose Mont Vernon Village School, then we need to reshuffle anyway for first grade, as it were. So it makes sense to wait until we know exactly what's happening before we tell parents a second time. So we don't have to tell parents a second time that they're being, their child's being reassigned again. Yes.
Would you need to ask the Mont Vernon board to potentially let you hire 2 teachers? Because you were saying adding one for kindergarten,
Yep.
then another
Yes.
for first grade, and then
That's right.
you sort of have a point that it wouldn't, you've got to have enough of a credit on
Sure.
the tuition.
Yep, I think that number is 6.
Over both grades,
No, for each grade.
6 for each.
Can you repeat what that number is?
6.
Sorry, for the magic number to make this work, to go to Mont Vernon Village School is 6 kindergarten kids, so less than 6,
No, no.
no go because the class would be fine. Above 6, you have to get a new teacher.
Yes.
Can you share this?
No, let me be clear about that. There will be time for public input
Okay.
at that, but if there's less than 6, then we won't send any kids from Amherst to Mont Vernon, because the finances wouldn't work. And the one class in Mont Vernon for kindergarten already has 23, so we're not gonna add more kids to the already huge class that they have right now. So we can only send kids from Amherst if we can afford to break up the class and have 2 teachers. Other board questions?
So can you repeat the piece about hiring a teacher, I guess? When would we know whether or not the 17th, based on your survey of? So, and at that point, we don't have enough time to hire a teacher.
Well, so tomorrow, Nicola Fraley is gonna post a kindergarten teacher position in Amherst. It's all ready to go to be posted tomorrow. And John will post a kindergarten and first grade teacher anticipated from Mont Vernon. So they'll both start the hiring process as if it's going to happen and notify candidates that there's no guarantee in Mont Vernon that it will happen. In Amherst, it will. That's a definite. That we'll move forward with that. But in Mont Vernon, it's a conditional process. And then in both districts, neither of you will have the chance to have a board meeting prior to the start of school, and so we ask you both to authorize me to make that conditional hire, and we'll bring them forward to the subsequent board meeting after that.
We have a board meeting Thursday.
Yeah, which I will have someone hired by Thursday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So there's 3 people to hire for this recommendation.
correct.
There's a kindergarten teacher at Mont Vernon, there's a first grade teacher at Mont Vernon, and an unfilled case manager position to go to the kindergarten at Clark School.
That's exactly right.
And does I know that the current agreement is based on actual number of students that started the year or finished the year?
It's trued up through the course of the year, so it actually goes through, as I recall, it actually trues it up over the course of the year, so it's a real time.
Well, my concern is we start with 6 and it makes it financially viable, and then 2 move out, and then we're 4, and then we're funded.
Correct.
Yes.
Right, so I think that's a concern.
What's physical space will be used for kindergarten and first grade class at Clark Wilkins?
Nikki, would you like to speak to that?
Certainly. In first grade, we've identified, if you're familiar with Clark Wilkins, we're kind of like an H or a case I, depending on which way you're looking at it. That center hallway, we've allocated a room on that center hallway, which is nice and central to all that's happening in the building. So while that classroom teacher, Liz Alexikos, will not be directly next to her first grade colleagues, she is central to everything else that's happening in the building, certainly not an island or isolated from her colleagues, and students are not isolated from other children either. And then at Clark, if you are familiar with that building, there's a room next to the multi-purpose room on the left-hand side, and that will be converted into a classroom. A wall needs to be taken down to make that a more usable space. But really, there's very little that already needs to happen in that room. It's a fantastic sized kindergarten classroom, it's huge. So that's a really great. And then obviously those people that were already working in those rooms tend to work with smaller groups of students, either providing intervention or targeted instruction. And so they are typically staff members that share space anyway. So they will be sharing in a different room with some new friends and new colleagues.
Is that true for, sorry, if I can just follow up real quick. Is that true for both rooms that you described? That
Yeah.
those were previously interventionist rooms, and that intervention work is gonna take place elsewhere?
Yes.
Okay.
Kim?
Yeah, can we go back to the per student ratio in the classrooms? And I'm not sure from that standpoint that this is more of a board decision as opposed to what you're doing down at your facilities, because that's something that your superintendent's recommending your board can have a discussion on. From our standpoint, we have financial aspects, and so do you, and I think we have to get to that. I'm sure parents are concerned where their kids are gonna go, but I think that that's something that's not done during this work session of our board to make a decision. Sorry about that. So my concern here is going down from the Mont Vernon standpoint, and adding a first grade teacher to a 13.3 from a student ratio. I'm not sure that that's beneficial from a standpoint from us. If we're at 15, to drop by 2 students, I mean, from a benefit standpoint, I'm not sure that that should even be into play. I mean, if we were having 16 from a standpoint, it's a number that we would like to be a little less, but we'd be comfortable with 16, I think, in Mont Vernon, or at least from my standpoint from our board. Whereas from 23, Mont Vernon may have to make a decision no matter what's made tonight as to what we do from our kindergarten standpoint. And we can do that at our Thursday meeting. That doesn't necessarily have to be done here tonight. But I'm not sure I'm comfortable as a board member with the recommendation of allowing first grade students to come if you're already doing the hiring and your percentage ratio gets you in the numbers of, I mean, sorry, Amherst has 18. We like 15 from our number, and dropping down by 2 is not a great benefit to me from a standpoint of a student run. We think that it can be done with a 15 standpoint, so.
And we also have 30, it seems to me that you're treating the 2 independently. It doesn't seem like it needs to be. Right? We could add certain quantity, less than 6 to first grade and not dramatically impact class size and still handle it, right? So I guess the question, is what's the likelihood that you expect, what are you expecting to see?
Well, I'm concerned that it's August 6th and we're still seeing more enrollments. I mean, that's typical during August, that we see more than what we have. There's typically some that will come in right before school starts. And so, Kim, I would agree that first grade is not as dire for either district, frankly. I think the kindergarten works for both districts more easily than first grade does. And so I'd be okay if Mont Vernon said, nope, we're not interested in first grade, that's fine. I'm just, part of me is wondering if we get 2 or 3 or 4 more in first grade in Mont Vernon, now we're above the ratio that we want. So that was my thought process, that there's not much concern from Mont Vernon's perspective if your finances are covered with another teacher.
So are you trying to future-proof it a little bit?
Yeah.
Just in case?
Frankly, all hands on deck is my attitude about this. If we can, whatever we can do to make class size in both counties work more effectively, we're not trying.
I got something for the record. It's critically important, the physical space aspect of this, Kim, because there was talk when this first came up that there was no viable space, and that things like stage and the cafeteria might be converted into temporary classroom space, which is really untenable. So in order to support the recommendations, I have to know that the space that they found is proper classroom space and not broom closets and theater stages. So it's very relevant for our board to consider here.
All right, Gail, did you have?
No, I just was on Terry's question, was we don't want to go through this again. It's in 6 months if both numbers have gone online.
Other board questions?
So you didn't answer
Steve,
my
Mr.
question.
I'm sorry. If I didn't answer yours, I'll
You
go
didn't
back
answer
to you.
Finish answering the question. Do you have any idea of the numbers now?
Yeah, the numbers as of today.
So in terms of what percentage of students would be interested in coming to Mont Vernon? Do you have any indication?
Yeah, so last week we had 7 folks that said they were interested. After the meeting, it was reduced to 5. After some conversations at home with this person, the other part of the family, we've had a couple other people email me during the week that say they're interested that weren't at the meeting. So my my read is somewhere between 5 and 10 is my guess.
So both grades or mostly
For
kindergarten?
mostly kindergarten, and we've not had as much conversation about first grade, so I'm doubtful whether first grade will even have any traction at all, to Kim's point.
Why is there a minimum number if, for example, a parent or a family did all the transportation themselves?
Yeah.
Would that eliminate the need for a minimum number? Is that a transportation-driven minimum?
No, it's essentially we're financing the cost of a new teacher in Mont Vernon Village
Oh,
School.
right.
So it's not, it could be that the Mont Vernon School Board says, well, hey, you give us 2 or 3 kids, we'll eat the difference because we're already at 23 in our kindergarten class. That's a decision for them to make. What I'm presenting tonight is, from my perspective, having to work financially for Mont Vernon requires six kids.
But if 0 Amherst kids go, and Mont Vernon is looking to hire another teacher anyway, wouldn't even a few at least help Mont Vernon?
That's up for their, that's up for their discussion.
Anyway, if it's, yeah, okay.
I would think so. If Mont Vernon's gonna tell me on Thursday, find money to hire another teacher anyway, I would think they'd be glad to receive even 2 kids.
Yeah.
But that's, Kevin.
Yes. So there were some questions asked by some parents that were considering that if this was actually a better scenario for them and their families. Some of the questions were asked, what about some of their older children? If they had a kindergartner or a first grader that was better scenario in Mont Vernon, but they also wanted to maybe move their second or third grader before, is that an option as well for those families?
I don't think so at this point. And the reason why is, say it's a 3rd grade student that we've had in Amherst for 4 years, I'd be concerned at that point that now we've had them at Clark for a year, Wilkins for a couple of years, then they go to Mont Vernon for a year, and then something happens with class size, they have to come back, or they spend 2 or 3 years at Mont Vernon Village School. I think that's too many moving parts. I suppose if there was a one-off case where a specific parent made that request and it made sense, sure, why not consider it, but I don't think it's something that I'm prepared to offer across the board.
And nobody's requested that, that's stuff that.
Received a lot of emails, I'm trying to make sure that no one has it, I've forgotten, but I don't think so. Other board member questions?
How does Amherst pay for, what are we sacrificing to pay for this hire?
Well, the place that we have to sacrifice on the budget side in Amherst is to fund the equipment and supplies needed for a 7th section of kindergarten and 1st grade. And so Stephanie has looked through the budget. We've already essentially locked down the Amherst budget because of financial woes that extend beyond this particular issue. But we can get into details if you'd like, but essentially Stephanie's figured it out for us. But it's things like technology purchases that will be delayed, facility projects that will be put off a year if they can. It's things in that area.
As opposed to instructional cuts?
Correct. Yeah, I don't see us cutting any instructional program at all to make this happen. Mr. O'Keefe.
So the middle school is kind of under our purview as well. What type of impacts is this reduction in a case manager going to do to middle school kids?
So that's a real concern. Bethany has already put a plan in place. It causes a number of moving parts to shift around, but she feels like she can get by in that scenario for a year. The enrollment at Amherst Middle School is not in good shape either. We have class sizes over 25 in 6th grade, and I believe right at 25 in 5th grade. When we first started this conversation internally, it was, we need to find a way to address class size in kindergarten, 1st grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade. We simply don't have the funds available or options available to us in 5th and 6th grade. And so we're focusing on kindergarten and 1st grade, because that's where research shows class size makes the most significant impact. Bethany feels comfortable that all the interventions we provide to kids in that grade level will be covered, but that other people have to pick up the slack for things like case management and those sorts of things. So essentially, Bethany and her administrative team are going to be doing more work.
So, not to perseverate, but when we take a look at that reduction in a case manager, one of the concerns that we brought up in our Mont Vernon meeting last time was about the transition of our kids up to the middle school and the perceived lack of support for that. So this is gonna actually amplify that and make that worse.
Well, it is a sixth grade position, so transition is in the seventh grade. But it's going to add stress to the Amherst Middle School, there's no doubt about that.
One more question. Are you thinking this is, I mean, I know now next year, your budget season, you have the ability to correct these things. So are you seeing this in your mind as a one-year problem? Or do you think this is more of a longer term?
Well, two reasons make me think it might be something that continues. One, some parents have expressed their desire that if they start at Mont Vernon Village School, if possible, they'd like to continue. The second is, we're out of space in Amherst, we're frankly out of space. If housing continues to move in the way it does in both towns, where the houses that have been approved to be built continue to be built, I expect more kids to come, and we don't have anywhere to go in Amherst right now. We'll be looking at short-term solutions. Those will range, I'm sure, from portable classrooms, renting space somewhere else, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But who knows what those will be, and it could be that Mont Vernon continues to be a viable option the year after this year. Shall we gather some public input prior to the board deliberating? Is there any additional public input? Please.
Go ahead. So I have a question. When you said it's near a cafeteria, how will that impact that classroom when the kids go to lunch?
No, the first grade hall.
No, not the
Kindergarten.
first grade.
Oh, so
Yeah, the
kindergarten,
first grade
okay,
hall I
yeah.
don't think is a problem.
No.
Because my daughter was in second grade in Mrs. Kennedy, and Mrs. Kennedy's in a whole different hallway than the other, and my daughter didn't care one bit.
So in kindergarten, all of our students either eat lunch together or recess together.
Okay.
So half of those students are outside playing, while half are eating, and then they flip-flop. So no students are receiving academic instruction during the recess lunch block. It's one block for the whole school.
But Jen?
Yeah, PE, I was actually in that office, so that used to be my office a few years ago, and it was actually our training center. I never heard PE, and I was in there all the time for a full day when PE was happening. I sometimes forgot it was even a PE day. There's a really
Closets
yes.
between the two
Okay.
rooms.
So
Yeah,
it's
so
not
it's-
a shared wall.
It was the classroom.
There's two
Okay.
sets
It
of
used to be a
closets.
classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was the art
Yeah.
and music room
And
for
it
a
even was
number of
before
years.
that,
Oh, okay.
it was a readiness classroom, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
If you could state your name.
sure, Shannon Gascoigne from Amherst. And I just have a few comments. It feels like we're playing whack-a-mole, and I appreciate the situation that we find ourselves in. I'm a little concerned that there was no mention of the projections that were made that got us into this budget crisis, or budgeting crisis for. If you look at the deliberative session handout, the budgeted numbers showed we didn't budget for any additional kids, which I think was an oversight that should be brought to attention. I'm concerned that we're losing something at AMS that sounds important, and I realize there are choices that need to be made. I'm also concerned that you're telling parents that they could have their kids stay at Mont Vernon Village School. Last Monday night, you said that Mont Vernon was growing just like Amherst, and that the people that you know who are in touch with the planning board have told you that. So it feels irresponsible to tell parents that their children could stay at Mont Vernon Village School. I know you've made the caveat that if it grows, but let's be honest, it's growing. So that's probably not a realistic thing to tell parents, especially if it's their first kid and they're, this is their first dip in the water of the school. I think the better story to tell parents is how we keep having to ship shape our buildings, and and that we're out of space. And I think the point that you brought up about AMS having large class sizes really is a story that we all want to hear as well, because these 7 second graders are going to be a cohort of 7 classes moving forward. Thank you.
Yes.
As a high school English teacher, I really appreciate that you guys are focusing on Common Core, because it was a transition for me, but I have found that the kids learn more deeply instead of just brushing over topics, and it's really hard to include in your curriculum. So I just wanted to say it's actually really great, because I want my son to work with Common Core, and the language is really hard on that. Because some of the things I'm like, I don't know what this means. So thank you for focusing on Common Core.
Could you share your name for the record?
Oh, I'm Katie Morshed, I'm from Amherst.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Jenny Watkins from Amherst. Do you guys know when you're gonna have a long-term plan to present? What are you shooting for?
We're working on it, so
Hope to see a crowd.
dealing with this first, and then shifting all of our attention and focus to the next thing, so.
We gotta solve this first.
Yeah, so our next Amherst School Board meeting, we'll have a conversation about that, where I'm gonna be gathering, we just had that agenda planning meeting earlier this afternoon. It's gonna be a topic where I'm gonna start gathering initial feedback and input from board members and community, if you show up, about what you think we need to be looking at. But if you think about it, we need to have something ready for March, which really means we need something ready to discuss in December, because it's gotta go to public hearing in January, deliberative in February, voting in March. So
So December-ish.
at the latest, and that doesn't feel that far away. Any other public comment? Guess we took care of it last week. For the most part. Thank you again, everyone. So, board members, Terry.
So I'm not public, but I guess I pay taxes too. So, first off, thank you for revisiting some of the questions from last week, because I wasn't able to be here for the beginning of the presentation, but I was here for most of the questions, and I know there were a lot of healthy, good questions. One thing that I don't think we revisited enough, and I would just like to put it in terms that I understand, because I always have to the whole education thing, I have a daughter who's a teacher, and so some of the stuff has been an easier fit for me to learn, and other things, being a board member, it has been a year full of learning. A lot of learning for me. And so I look at it like this, forecasting, this month will be 8 years in my house. The first thing I did was add a wood stove. I moved in August and I added a wood stove. I said, okay, I want to have a backup source of heat, I want to have a backup thing. And the first couple of years, it was a crapshoot for how much wood to order. It was like, I don't know, a quart, 2 quarts, I don't know. And by the end of 8 years, I've gotten really good at figuring out how much wood I need each year. Right now, I've got 2 cords of seasoned wood sitting left over from last year. It was a cold winter last year. You know what I didn't factor in? I didn't factor in the fact that I was going to be working out of my home more. I wasn't going to be working from home. I was going to be in the office, and I wouldn't be there to feed the stove. I had worked from home for 5 years, and I fed the stove all day. I wasn't there during the day. My husband hurt his shoulder. He wasn't able to carry big bunches of wood in, so we just didn't use the stove that much this summer. This summer. Thankfully not the summer, but not this winter. And so I have extra wood. Sometimes, even when you've done your best, we have equations that go into trying to figure these things out. And for the most part, they work close enough that we're able to make good plans. They use those equations, they did due diligence, we made plans, and guess what? We had some surprises. And we can't undo what's been done, right? Those plans already happened. You have to plan so early for a budget that happens way later. And then when you have stuff that changes in the middle, it's like, well, crap. We don't have enough to go around. And it's just the way it is. And then you say, well, what are we gonna do now? So I absolutely appreciate that question of why didn't you plan better? We have a lot of new people that are part of this planning right now, that we have a lot of administration that's changed over, and we know that this is a real important thing for us to tackle head on. We need to plan better. For me personally, I don't like budget surprises in my own home. I would rather get a tax refund than have to pay at the end of the year. It's like, fine, keep my interest. I don't want to get surprised. So I would rather that we give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room and we budget. We can talk about that, deliberative. But I know that I don't like surprises, you don't like surprises, and I absolutely understand that. But I do feel like due diligence was done and they tried their best to forecast. So when we get to it, we say, well, we're not where we want to be. We could just say, well, for this year, I'm sorry, these kindergartners are going to have a not ideal first experience. That is also not an option that we think is viable. So we're at a place where we've got to do something, and the something is not just hope for the best and do nothing. So I really appreciate the fact that we revisited some of the ones that we said, well, how about this, how about that? Because they said, well, you're only giving us the one you want. So now we revisited more of the ones that we really took a closer look and a deeper dive, and I know the time has gone into it. And so thank you for explaining those well, because I think it's helped all of us to go, okay, that's why that wouldn't be a good choice right now. And maybe it would going forward, maybe it wouldn't, but more information, again, for me, I can only speak for me, but I like having lots of information. Don't tell me what I don't want to know. I'll tell you when I got enough. And so I really appreciate that. And I think that thank you for being here. Anybody who's not on this board and who's not a teacher, because I'm so excited to see people in the audience and hear what's going on and know that the number one way that your kid is going to be successful is that you keep showing up and that you keep being involved and asking questions. This is the number one way that no matter what we do, whether we do our jobs well or not, which hopefully we will, but even if we didn't, you're the number one indicator of your child's success. Is you're being involved and just knowing what's going on and being and asking every day, hey, what'd you do today? Hey, let's do our homework together. Getting to know your child's teacher. And so please keep showing up. PTA president's right for Amherst, at least, is right in the second row. She'd be happy to take your name and have you on board. There is an awful lot that we can all do together, and there's so little that we can do alone, right? And so thank you for showing up, thank you for being involved, and thank you for letting us know what's on your mind. Yes?
Can I just ask one more question?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I'm from Mont Vernon. Just out of curiosity.
Can you share your name, please?
My name's Mary Wiley. I have a daughter going into first grade, a son going into fourth grade at Village. I'm just curious, at what point does the Mont Vernon only kindergarten enrollment have to get up to before we're going to be faced with another kindergarten class or teacher just on our own? Just out of curiosity. Thank you.
So I'll try to answer on behalf of what will be our discussion on Thursday. So I think we're there. We're likely going to be one of the largest, if not the largest, kindergarten average class size in the state at 23, and it's August 6th. It's not unreasonable to assume that there will be others that enroll. People could move out too. There's no, it's, one class, it's more volatile. It could go either direction, but it seems like it's going up. Based on prior board discussions, I'm assuming that there will be, if nothing else, something on the budget next year to address that as well. But that's just my read.
So for this year, just for example, say we have 6 more kindergartners decide, hey, we're moving to Mont Vernon and coming to Village. Are we prepared to hire another teacher?
Well,
is there a plan?
Yeah, the board would need to sign off on that, but I would be recommending that we seek high and low to find an ability to do that, because I think we're at that tipping point right now.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. My name is Norbert Dudek from Amherst. Given the tight labor market and only 4 weeks away from school starting, what are the odds of us not finding teachers? And if we find one in November or October, how is that going to affect the kids? Are they going to be split up at that point?
Yeah, great question. So if this was a high school chemistry teacher, I'd be really nervous to be August 6th and trying to find a high school chemistry teacher right now, because they're generally in short supply. The teaching staff where we have the most candidates apply is elementary, and specifically early elementary. So how many applicants did we get the last time? Was it over?
Yeah, when we posted earlier, or late winter, we had a number of positions open. We had 130 applicants for full positions. We recently posted an anticipated vacancy because we weren't quite sure what was going to happen here. We left it posted for 2 weeks, and I think we just had slightly over 40 applicants. So, as Adam said, the pool is pretty deep for elementary. We're pretty fortunate. High school chemistry teacher or a trade teacher, I think we'd be hunting for a long time, but we're pretty lucky where we are in elementary.
And that goes for Mont Vernon as well.
I appreciate, Terry, all the work that's gone into this too, so I really didn't, my comment was not to be combative. And I know that there's a process and a formula, but if you look at the numbers, they're exactly the same numbers as the prior year moved over. Which makes me take pause when I'm looking and think, oh, nothing shifted here. And I would assume, and I am not a numbers person, I will be very honest about that, but I would assume that there would be some room. And so that was my point. But again, I know that a lot of work has gone into
I think
this.
if anything, we're gonna be guessing a little high.
Right, absolutely.
We're gonna be trying to give ourselves some space.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Scott Noon from Amherst. I'm an incoming kindergartner. So just an add-on to his question. So how long is the vetting process usually? So even if you had somebody tomorrow say, yeah, I'm ready, would that be a 2-week process, 3-week process?
We'll do what happened for the start of school if at all possible. You know, if there was an unbelievable candidate and they said they couldn't start the first week of school, maybe we'd make something work the first week, but in general, we'll shoot for someone that we can have for the start of school.
That, you know, we're still waiting to know who our teacher is going to be, so we're excited about it. So.
Yeah. And a correction earlier, first grade parents found out earlier today who their updated class lists were, so when I said we're going to wait till the 20th, I was wrong about that. All right, so if it's okay with the board, I'd like to just ask a couple of questions, and these are not votes, but just want to get a read of the board. So maybe in Mont Vernon first, my question would be, are you open to the concept of Amherst students being tuitioned into kindergarten? Is that, yeah, okay. Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
Yeah. So then, the corollary to that would be, are you open to the idea of first grade students from Amherst being tuitioned as well?
I'm less open to hiring a third teacher.
Got it.
But again, I'm not sure that that's gonna be the issue.
Okay.
And now I'll do my same answer.
Same for me.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I make a point on that? If there were enough Amherst first graders to justify and that the credit from the tuition would pay for the teacher, then it becomes neutral to you, would that be more attractive? Or relay the concern that you just expressed?
So in speaking for myself, I actually had the luxury of experiencing both Amherst and Mont Vernon from an elementary school standpoint. We went through kindergarten and the beginning part of first grade in Amherst, and then we moved up here to Mont Vernon. And not to say anything bad about Amherst, because I grew up around here, but this school is phenomenal. The guy in the back, Mr. Schuttinger, is by far in my opinion, the best principal, no offense, in the entire state. He makes this place a really fun place to go every day. My kids love coming here. We get great feedback from parents. Where else do you get an elf on the shelf on top of the building? That's greeting kids at Christmas time. So yeah, and when we talked about this idea back in July, experiencing both schools and seeing the great benefits of this place, absolutely, I'm completely in favor of opening it up. We've talked at a couple of our sessions about how can we share the story of our school a little bit better, because our test scores are phenomenal. Again, parent-teacher feedback. We want to come up with a grading score schedule for 2018, 2019 that we can share with the parents of our community, because we have awesome things going on here. So absolutely, I'm 100% in favor of anybody that wants to come up here, as long as we can make the math work. And believe it or not, I know between Adam and John, we would make that work.
And I am willing to stipulate that John is the best principal in this entire town.
Kristen Patno from Amherst. I have a kindergartner who's coming in and I'm trying to make this decision. And I just wanted to thank you for that comment because it makes me feel a lot more confident in making the decision. Knowing that it could change going forward makes me uncertain as to where I should send him, but knowing that you're open to it.
Yeah, so speaking for myself, that was my absolute number one concern about the transition back into the Amherst school system. But I think that Adam and team are going to really focus on that and make that a positive experience, because we're not going to do anything that's detrimental to any kid, regardless if they're a citizen of our town or a guest of our town, because that's the way I view it. A kindergarten kid, a first grade kid, second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way up to sixth. We got great things going on here, and if we can share that, all the better.
And the only other thing that I think And I don't know all of the Amherst board members as well from a Mont Vernon standpoint, but our focus has always been what's best for the kids.
That's right.
And when this was approached to us, it was more of a, geez, their class sizes are going to be very large. And is that in the best interest of the students? And in our mind, from a Mont Vernon board standpoint, we do the best we can to keep our numbers where they are and be fiscally responsible, but to make sure that we're taking care of the kids first. So it's important to us.
All right, some questions of Amherst board members. First question is, are you comfortable with the reassignments of the 3 staff that I put forward?
It's hard to swallow, but.
Thank you. Beth said yes. Thank you. Yes.
I'm not thrilled with it, but I think it's a necessary evil for 1 year. I think that the way you start your school career matters. And that it's just so important to have that be a good, strong, positive start. So for that reason only, yes.
Mr. Glover.
I think the biggest risk to our investment that we've made the last 20 years in establishing such a reputable school district, this problem really puts that at great risk. And so, yes, reassignments will work. I'm encouraged that they're a year. I'll look forward to the budget season for that being unwound and put back in order. But yes, I support that.
Is the Amherst board okay with the prospect of sending kindergarten students from Amherst to Mont Vernon?
Absolutely, yes. I would even say that we should actively persuade parents to consider it and assure them that even if they are unable to keep their children in the Mont Vernon school for the duration, that we have children go to Clark, then they go to Wilkins, then they go to Amherst, and we already have 4 buildings, 5 if you include Mont Vernon, so they're already moving around all over the place. So, and parents are going in 2 places at the same time, all the time because of that. So it's not a totally detrimental thing that should lead someone to say, that's not for me. Like, I think it'd be our job to help persuade them, anyone, that this is a great opportunity, not a something that oh my God, I'm gonna make this great sacrifice for the towns, okay?
I'll put you down as a yes.
And it's, yeah.
Thank you. Terry.
I actually want to thank the Mont Vernon board for seeing that we have this issue and I know that, again, I can only speak for me, but that I have the same focus that whatever's best for the kids, the rest of it will make it work, right? And so I know that that's how you feel, and I want to thank you for being gracious and not just seeing us struggling and saying, oh, what you got yourselves into over there. Good luck with that. You know, that instead you've been very gracious and open and trying to work with us when you don't have to, quite honestly. And so thank you for that. And I'm excited that I've been able to spend more time over here this year because it really is a really awesome little school. And so you kind of can't go wrong either way. I think Clark's amazing. My child's been there. I think Wilton's amazing, but I think that this is equally amazing in its own special way, and so we can't go wrong. We have yes, I'm fully in support.
Beth.
Yes, I am absolutely all for it. I think if parents want to do this and feel that Mont Vernon is the best place for their student, I think it's absolutely up for us to support that.
Thank you. Beth was a yes for those of you who couldn't hear. Gail.
Yes.
Kevin.
Now that there are other options and other solutions in place, then that I am a yes for this as an option for those that it works best for. I was not okay with it being forced upon folks as and holding large class sizes hostage with that. I'm okay with it as an option if it works best, absolutely. As long as those other 2 are still in play, I'm going to be a yes.
Okay. Next question for Amherst, what about first grade students?
Absolutely, yes, for all the same reasons. And the further persuasive point is we've heard criticisms that oh, I moved to Amherst and I don't want to send my kid to another district. And I've heard it minimized, that the notion that, oh, well, we're in the same SAU, we have all the same curriculum, doesn't matter. But that's what makes it work. We have the same curriculum. There'll be, from an instructional perspective, there'll be absolutely no difference if a kid went to Mont Vernon one year and Amherst the next and Mont Vernon again and then ping-ponged throughout their whole career. They would have the exact same institutional experience. So, you know, the fact that we're 2 districts under one SAU makes it even possible and makes it a persuasive case in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Terry?
I'm less excited about first grade only because I don't want to put a strain on what this school has tried so hard to maintain. So if it would benefit them and be okay, then I'm for it. If it would be detrimental to them in any way, then I would not.
Okay. Thank you. Beth?
Yeah, again, it's, you know, if the parents feel that that's what's best for their child in the situation, I'm all for it.
Struggle.
Yes, echoing Terry, as long as it doesn't put a burden on Mont Vernon.
Okay.
Yeah, for the same reasons I stated previously, I'm gonna be a yes. And I just also wanted to say thank you very much. 5 weeks ago, we couldn't have been on more opposite ends of this. So thanks, Nikki, Kathleen, Adam, everybody that worked for this. Christine, thanks for really, really pining and trying to find these solutions. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I just want to make a point about that statement, Kevin. So we met as a 2 boards about a month ago. It was an 8-to-1 vote. And what's interesting to me is that where I started in this process is not where I've ended up. I'm tasked with making these recommendations and hearing from all sides and trying to discern all that. I just want to say that this has to be a community decision. It takes a village to raise kids. And I really feel that all of you were really helpful in providing perspective, insight, input, disagreeing. But I'm really proud that really there was not one nasty word shared, right? And this was a very enlightening process for me and an encouraging process, because I think we have other even more challenging issues to tackle over these next couple of years. And the fact that we were able to do this and so many folks spoke out, engaged, participated, and that it changed my perspective as well from learning from all of you, makes me excited for what other things we can do in the future. So I just want to thank the board for bearing with me through these extra meetings, and the community for dealing with a midsummer surprise. So thank you for all of that. So I'm hearing alignment. What am I missing? Is there any other issues that need to be discussed before boards take motions?
Yeah, I think just understanding the timing for working out transportation and just the other issues that have to be figured out.
Okay, so what will happen from here, as I mentioned before, will be Wednesday, we'll send letters out to all kindergarten and first grade parents in Amherst to let them know and provide some context. I'm not going to read, litigate's the wrong word, but I'm not going to go over the issue ad nauseum again for parents because it's too much to, in a letter form. I think I'll reference their online videos and online what have you, and ask parents on Wednesday to start the process of making that decision for themselves. Next Monday, we'll have an open house up here for Amherst parents who want to come and take a tour of the school if they've not done so already. And by Friday the 17th, I'll ask for those folks to make an affirmative choice by that date. I want my child to go to Mont Vernon Village School, and then to identify any restrictions on that choice that might exist. For example, it's got to be the shuttle, or I need to know, feel pretty confident that they'll be able to stay at the village school moving forward, whatever those conditions might be. From the 17th, we'll gather all those, look at them, and alert the board to here's what we've learned, here's who's made these choices, and here's what we're going to let parents know on Monday about what's going to happen. And then Monday the 20th, work with parents and publish that information about what we need to do. So the transportation piece, I think, will come together if we can find a way. I've already asked Porter Dodge to look into what, if any, costs there'll be for the shuttle. I'm hoping we can find a way to make it be no cost, so it can get just absorbed into regular routes somehow, and work with the bus company with that, but we'll do our best to avoid a cost impact for that if it needs to be in place. It'll be a busy August 20th through the start of school because we'll have to reshuffle a number of things. We'll have to hire teachers, move classrooms around, help parents with any logistical issues if they're moving to a different classroom or to a different school, but we'll work all of that out. So, and again, if parents are not interested in the village school as an option, there's no need to respond or to notify us. I don't need all 122 messages, but we'll just assume you're staying right where you are.
And should we be planning another board meeting, it sounds like, before the September, our meeting is this week. It seems like we would need another board meeting.
I'm gonna be looking for you folks to set parameters in your motion this evening that make it comfortable for you. So if you say we need 6 in kindergarten, then I would suggest you make that motion. If we need 7 as a minimum, you know, whatever the case may be. For this to work, I think we need a decision tonight about the direction to go, and I don't want to offer to Amherst parents that you have this option only to find out that the board then subsequently says that's not, you know, that I don't want the target to move, so to speak. I'll clearly say to parents in the letter it's subject to the number of, you know, a sufficient number of people making the selection. At least my thinking is that I prefer that the board give me the parameters this evening and let me go make it happen, if that's possible. Yes?
Question. In order to make that decision, do we have the actual numbers laid out? Because you're talking about 6 or 7 and.
I think it's 6.
Okay.
My recommendation is that you say 6.
Okay.
Because I think that's safe. We're not going to be hiring a teacher with a master's degree and on step 47. You know, that's not the type of teacher that we'll likely be hiring for this position. It may not be a rookie either, but we're not going to. So at 6 teachers, at 6 students should make it work.
Okay, and then help me.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, what is the
the
cost that you're assuming based on that fully loaded with full family insurance?
Yeah, so I'm assuming about $85,000.
All in? And what would be the tuition exchange?
Yep.
Is
So
it gonna be a 1-to-1 or not?
no, so the tuition agreement with Mont Vernon students, the 7th and 8th grade in Amherst right now, essentially uses the cost per pupil of that current year.
Okay.
So it takes the tuition amount calculated for that current year. There's some adjustments to it, and it's a little convoluted. So I'm recommending you do the inverse here, that whatever the cost per pupil here for this whole school would be the tuition rate credited going back the other way. So it would be slightly less. Elementary school is less expensive than middle school and high school.
Yep.
So it would not be a direct 1-to-1, but it'd probably be close. And last year's between $16,000 and $17,000, so it's probably going to be between $16,000 and $17,000 per kid.
Okay.
From Mont Vernon as well?
Which it wasn't there
That's
last
cost
year
per
between
pupil
16
here.
and 17. Yeah.
One more question. The transportation, if there is cost associated with that, how is that gonna be handled?
Great question.
Thanks.
Any answers? Yeah, I think Amherst would need to pick up the tab for that as transportation for Mont Vernon students going to AMS is charged back in the same way. So.
And then any cost for any special ed costs or any of that would be actual costs, right?
Yeah, that's part of the existing tuition agreement.
Which is way
Right, it's just
one part,
exactly,
yep.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so just to be clear, it's illegal for us to say that only certain types of students, based on their educational abilities or disabilities, would be allowed to go in one or either direction. So it's not even a question that would be asked and would not be a consideration for us, nor should it be. And I think everyone pretty much understands that. I will take one more question.
I just have a question. I understand that 6 is your magic number, 6 or 7. If there's a parent, you know, they get 40 parents show up here, they meet John, they tour the school, and they say, wow, they're right, this school is phenomenal. I'm just being realistic here. I mean, if you get people showing up here because there's an open house and they come in and they see the school and they're like, wow, this really is, and maybe I do like this better. No offense, I mean, I work at Clark and Amherst. But what's the contingency there? If you get more people to sign up, is there a cutoff?
Yeah,
Or
so-
is there a, well, I'm sorry, it's first come, first serve?
Yeah, if there were 30 parents from Amherst, I'd be shocked, first of all.
Well, no,
But
I'm
if,
not
yeah, great question.
making light of it, but I'm just
No,
saying, what
it's
if
a great
it would
question.
happen?
What if it happens? Yeah, so if that were to happen, I would think that if I'm Mont Vernon, I would assume that I would take no more than 9 kids. And here's
Okay.
why. 9 kids would get us to 32 in Mont Vernon, which is 16 per class, which still leaves some room for a couple of move-ins.
Okay.
Right. Otherwise, we have to go to hiring 2 additional kindergarten teachers, and that seems like a lot. Then we have 3 classes of kindergarten, and then 2 everywhere else, and I think that goes. So I'm thinking it's between 6 and 9. And if there's more than 9 that sign up, the only fair way to do that is if there's a lottery system.
Okay.
Right.
Just a point of clarification on this minimum number. I thought I had understood this before, but now I'm confused. It would help if there was even one. Mont Vernon is going to hire a kindergarten teacher, regardless of whether even one Amherst student comes. So even one coming helps. Now, I could understand why you might need 6 to justify a shuttle or something like that, but not, why would there be a minimum that Mont Vernon would even consider, because any would be good? Maybe what they should be considered is the maximum, 9, because that gives them the cap.
Yep.
So that they don't get flooded out
Well,
of their leadership.
so in the Mont Vernon School Board's defense, they've not even known about, that they've gone from 20 to 23 in a week. So this is the first.
That's
thing.
beside the point. The point is.
Well, except that they can't make that decision tonight.
No, okay, fair point. Well, then.
So we can change we have a board meeting on Thursday, so we may change, but for a standpoint of it, if we start now with saying a minimum of 6 and a maximum of 9, then at least that gives wiggle room from an Amherst standpoint, us from a standpoint of putting an advertisement in for a teacher, and then us as a board having a discussion. It may be that we on our Thursday discussions decide that whether Amherst has any or not, we still may want to do that. But that's something that we, of course, just got those numbers here as we're sitting here tonight, and we don't like to make decisions on the same night that we get the information. We like to have some time to think about that and have another meeting on it, which is scheduled for Thursday.
So for Thursday, you're prior warning about the numbers?
We've had that tonight, so I won't be complaining about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a little bit about some of the shuttle talk that we're having here, because I think the way I'm envisioning this is the folks that are really going to benefit and that this is convenient for are the folks that are going to be doing drop-off and pick-up. Maybe they've got sitters in the south end. The shuttle really wouldn't be an option. If it is, it's not the most convenient. After all, some of the reasons we dismissed some of the other options was because we want to reduce stress, we want to reduce transition time. And some of the dialogue I heard last week about how a shuttle would take place by taking your normal AM bus and then grabbing a bus from Clark up to here. Then afternoon, maybe you could take a bus back, but you're going to be 20 minutes by the pickup. I mean, I don't want my kindergartner riding around like a New York City Metro. So I know that the shuttle is a good thought, but I don't see it realistically marrying with the folks that this would really benefit more for. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see it.
And I think that's what I would want to hear from. I have heard from some folks that have reached out to me have said if the transportation option that you presented was available, then I'd be interested.
Right.
So I think there's some parents that work.
So, I still don't understand.
One second, let me get to Mr.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
I actually had the experience of doing the shuttle, kind of, in a way. When I lived in Amherst, I used to do morning program in the morning and in the afternoon. When I moved to Mont Vernon, that was no longer an option. I wrote a letter to the school board asking for the Brook Road school bus to actually go a quarter of a mile south, stop at the Wilkins School, pick up my son from the morning program, and then drive a quarter mile back up to Old Amherst Road, and then head up to the village school. At the time, the business administrator, wasn't Adam, denied the request, saying that inter-district transportation wasn't an option. So I timed it, it was 4.5 minutes. So it is not a big deal. The shuttle is an easy option, especially people need that morning care. In the afternoon, it's the same exact thing. Bus comes down that road anyway. It's got to head up Brook Road to drop off by Joe English and so forth up on the northern side of town. It is not a big deal. Where the issue comes in is if I live on Hollis Road, or if I live on Nashua Street, or somewhere on the south side of Amherst, I'm putting my kid on the bus at 7 o'clock in the morning to get up to the Wilkins School, and then from there on a shuttle up to the Mont Vernon School. That's the issue. I can tell you, driving by the Wilkins School every day, and the Mont Vernon Village School, and being here for pickup and drop off, both schools, it seems like nobody takes the bus. Everybody drives. So it is a very viable option. It's not a concern for me. I'm completely comfortable, if I still lived in Amherst, sending my kid on the quote-unquote Brook Road bus stop. So that's all I can say. Mr. White.
I just don't understand why the recommendation for minimum number of students then. If it's not transportation driven, why?
Yeah,
Why
it's,
that?
again,
What's your
it's
reasoning for that?
my reasoning is to cover Mont Vernon's cost for the teacher, the additional teacher they're going to hire.
Right, and that totally makes sense if your recommendation also didn't include a recommendation for Mont Vernon to hire independently of what Amherst does. I know the two things can be maybe interdependent, and maybe Mont Vernon will reject that recommendation and do one class at 23 plus however many more come. But so if they're gonna, I guess my modification to your recommendation would be something like an if-then statement. If Mont Vernon hires another teacher, then there's really any student up to some maximum from Amherst could work.
So here's the middle ground. I think the Amherst motion could be, we're willing to send as many kids up the hill as want to go.
Or as Mont Vernon.
And Mont Vernon's motion might be, we're willing to accept 6 this evening. We might adjust that Thursday to another number, right? Because that way Amherst is authorized to do without a minimum. And Mont Vernon this evening is not going to, my guess is Mont Vernon's not going to accept any less than 6 as a minimum this evening, but they might amend that Thursday night perhaps.
I'm good with that.
One second, Ms. Kuzma. And could you state your name?
Yes, my name's Heather. I'm from Amherst. So with the shuttle, I do think that you should keep the shuttle idea, because if you think about it, the kids that go to PIV, so my preschooler took the bus in the morning, and she was like 4, with her twin sisters, went to preschool at Clark, then walked to PIV, walked back, and then took the bus home. And that was in the days where they took the bus to Wilkins and then took another bus over. So, and she didn't mind, the only thing she cared about was carrying her backpack to PIV. But I think for the most part, people always say, oh, kids don't want to be on the bus. My kids, we just moved within Amherst, and they're mad because their bus is shorter. So I think a lot of us think like, oh, the kids are on the bus for so long. They're really not on the bus for that long, and they actually, I would say, a majority of the kids like to ride the bus.
Yeah, it's my junior in high school that does not want to.
Yes, yes. I would say in high school, nobody's going to want to ride. So I think that people have a misconception about what the bus.
Mr. O'Keefe.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we're gonna talk about this on Thursday, but like we did last year, when we examined that this is gonna be potentially a problem, we put in for a new teacher. Our principal recommended 3 new teachers. We got 1, thankfully to the support of our community, we got 1 added into the budget. This year we have 2 classes or 2 grades that only have 1 teacher. I envision the same kindergarten teachers that were there last year redoing kindergarten in light of some Amherst kids coming up, and us hiring maybe another 3rd or a 4th grade teacher. I mean, that's a whole different conversation, but I do see our point of saying at least a minimum, because we don't want to open up the door for 1 kid, which I'm completely welcoming, by the way, but 1 kid and then create the infrastructure around 6 to only have 1 kid sign up. In terms of a maximum, like I said to Tom, this school is designed, that Mr. King mentioned at our last meeting, for 250 kids. We're right now at 189, so there's enormous capacity here that I really think that shouldn't be minimized at all. So if we had the flexibility, we had the capabilities to invite more kids in, I don't see a problem with 40 kids, I highly doubt it, but 40 kids coming in, I don't see an issue as a board member. But I do agree with the minimum, just to say, hey, from a planning standpoint, because we do want to set success up for all of our kids here, and we can't do that if there's a 1 kid or 2 kid, and we're going out, we're hiring based on a minimum of 6. That's my only concern.
Got it. Okay.
Are we ready?
I think so. Would you like to make a motion?
Sure. You want to help me with my verbiage of my motion? My motion would be to allow the superintendent to advertise advertise for a new kindergarten position at Mont Vernon Village School in, perceiving that Amherst will send a minimum of 6 students to kindergarten at Mont Vernon Village School, the maximum of 9.
And I assume you mean in part of the motion that the existing tuition agreement will be amended?
Based on the per pupil cost, yes.
And that will also authorize me to conditionally hire that kindergarten teacher.
We can do that on a Thursday night?
I don't have a hire by that.
Yes, but we can
But
make
we
that
can make
motion
that
on a
motion
Sure,
on
Thursday.
yeah,
Thursday.
that's fine. Okay, is there a second?
But thank you, Christine.
Is there a second to Kim's motion? All right, any discussion by the board?
Can I ask for a modification of the motion?
Oh, please.
That the cap of 9 be removed and then replaced with language subject to the discretion of the superintendent that's in the best interest of the kids of the Mont Vernon Village School.
Why?
Because if we have 10 kids, I don't want to say no to 1. If we have 15 kids, I don't want to say no to 6. I think that the superintendent saying a 40 example, again, highly doubtful, but clearly there may be a capacity thing that we can squeeze in a short period of time. But I don't want to limit it to just 9,
We
so.
can have an emergency meeting after the 17th in order to do that if we need to amend that motion. I think what it's giving us is what our option is from a hiring of 1. Because if we get to a higher number, so sorry, we love to have these nice debates for things that's on the table. I think we should be having that based on what they get after 17. If they, Steve came back with a higher number than 17, I'd be very happy to have an emergency meeting and revisit that. But I think from this standpoint, it's giving us on 1 higher, that number in there, because other than that, we'd be scrambling to look at another.
I think it's a great problem to have, but I'd like to revisit it after the 17th too.
I'd like to have the problem first.
Yeah, I'd like to have the problem first.
Okay. All right, any further discussion?
I agree with
All right.
Are you good with that, Steve?
Good.
Okay.
All right, for the Mont Vernon board member, all those in favor of Kim's motion, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. All right, for the Amherst.
Excuse me.
Got a very late one.
Can you slide this to whoever is making the motion so I
Sure.
can make sure I fully understand it?
Yeah. Deal.
So I would like to make a motion, we need to, for the reassignments to.
The only reassignment I need a motion for is the AMS case manager, because that's a budget transfer between buildings.
So I'd like to make a motion to allow the reassignment of the AMS case manager budget to hire an additional kindergarten teacher at Clark School, and to allow parents to select Mont Vernon Village School for kindergarten. Or to send kids to Mont Vernon in kindergarten and first grade contingent on the Mont Vernon motion. And
Their
we also
position
amend
in
the
that.
tuition agreement based on.
Yep. Very good. Excellent. Is there a second to Galen's motion?
I can second it.
Any discussion?
Yes. I have a question. The motions for Mont Vernon was contingent upon, well, maybe you guys in Mont Vernon will have to figure this out. I don't know how this comes into our motion, but it would seem that if Mont Vernon hires a teacher anyway, then this whole notion of the minimum kind of goes away, eventually.
I didn't hear a minimum in Galen's motion.
I know,
Okay.
but contingent upon Mont Vernon's motion, is what she said.
Right.
Which it was, I'll keep going back to this.
And they can amend their motion.
And
by another
they
meeting.
could, so I guess I just wanted to be clear that this is all happening right now, and that we can maintain some good communication about how many students are
And that's my job.
interested, and if Mont Vernon decides to hire a new teacher regardless of what Amherst does, that would be really helpful information. It might, if we have 4 families that want to do this, then we could let them make the grand experiment.
What you need is someone to coordinate the activities between the boards. Oh, wait. Here I am.
Yes.
I will communicate.
I know I keep going back to that, but I don't want to somebody who gets really excited about this, because I really think this is a great opportunity. I had no idea that you had so much capacity in this lovely building.
But there's a tax implication, is there not? I apologize, but if one student goes, there's still a tax implication for Amherst residents,
correct.
isn't that true? So your point about if they're hiring a teacher anyway, there's still something for the Amherst resident to consider from a taxpayer perspective. So there is more to it than just sending the kid over.
6 kids is $102,000, yet you're only reducing the number by 1 in each class. So is that worth taking 1 kid and moving them for $102,000 tax? Because you're paying, you just, am I correct? It's $17,000? Okay, around $17,000 for 1 student. So 6 students, so you're talking about 100. So does that really, I mean, in first grade, is that worth $100,000 out of the budget to drop 1 kid?
Yeah. So, thank you, Ms. Hampton.
Is
Your
that-
voice sounds better, by the way.
Thanks.
Yeah,
It was 17 go to 100.
16 is 100.
So it makes, well, look, the way I look at it is this, if Mont Vernon is willing to accept Amherst students as a principal, and there's space, and we work all this stuff out, then that's gonna provide a proper classroom, you know, in an established space. And this could be the short-term solution that bridges us to a long-term solution. This could be somewhat of an actual longer-term solution. It's going to be way cheaper than portables, which are super expensive and not good air quality. There's not an ideal space, not a proper space in my view. And so if this experiment works, I would love to just, if only 4 people are in, only 1 or 2 are in, then let's start this. Now that's what I see going forward, knowing that this problem isn't going away and that this wonderful facility is here, and that if we get a good thing going on and work out the logistics, that this could be a really enriching thing for all of us for a long term.
All right, Ms. Kuzma. Beth, did you have something to add? Go ahead.
Can I vote? Just got off as the whole purpose of motion.
Okay. I am comfortable calling for a vote. It will need to be a roll call since Beth is on the phone. So, Mr. Shea.
Shea, yes.
Terry Bean.
Bean, yes.
Mr. Glover.
Glover, yes.
Ms. Kuzma.
Kuzma, yes.
Chairman Trimble.
Tremblay, yes.
All right, motion carries 5-0. All right, is there any other business we need to attend to this evening?
I think I might have misunderstood. What was
So,
the reallocation?
so moving the funds from the Amherst Middle School to Clark Wilkins School requires board approval to the budget transfer between buildings. So is that piece, and is authorizing the tuition agreement to be amended for kindergarten and first grade students, essentially.
It's all within the Amherst School District budget, it's just.
So was there the one that the reallocation was for first grade or for kindergarten?
That is for.
That's the kindergarten, that's the kindergarten position.
The first grade position is being filled by a current.
That transfer of a position doesn't require board approval.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll do it. All right, hearing nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make the motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 We're adjourned.